In 1966, a young boy vanished without a trace. No body, no clues, nothing. 50 years later, his backpack was found, sealed inside a wall of the school library. What really happened to that boy during all those years? Drop a like, share your theory in the comments, and keep watching, because the truth behind this disappearance is far more shocking than you think. Justin panted heavily, legs pumping as he ran for his life down the pitch-black road. The 11-year-old boy tore through the night, his feet slamming against the cracked pavement of Willow Street. Sweat streamed down his forehead, his eyes stung and his chest burned with every gasping breath. Behind him, the roar of an engine grew louder, its headlights slashing through the darkness like claws. Justin didn't dare look back. His entire body was failing him. His legs trembled with exhaustion. His stomach churned with hunger. His throat was parched, and both sides of his rib cage throbbed with stabbing pain. Days of hunger, sleeplessness, and constant fear had drained him to the bone. He ran on pure instinct, nothing left but broken breaths and a rising panic choking his lungs. The car behind closed in fast. Tires screeched as it swerved sharply. Justin threw a quick glance over his shoulder. The blinding headlights seared into his vision, and he instinctively raised his hands to block the light. His foot caught on the edge of the pavement. He stumbled. His breath caught in his throat, and a choked sob escaped his lips. "Please, don't let him catch me." Everything started that day. It was a crisp autumn day in 1966 when Justin Hayes walked out of Jefferson Elementary, same as he did every day around noon. The leaves were turning, painting the small town of Millwood, Ohio, in shades of red and gold. Kids spilled out of the school, laughing, shoving their voices, carrying on the breeze. Justin, a quiet boy with sandy hair and a birthmark on his right cheek, wasn't one for lingering. He was neat, orderly, the kind of kid who always had his homework done and his lunchbox packed. His mom, Evelyn, worked at the corner store, and his dad, Frank, clocked long hours at the steel mill 2 towns over. That left Justin to fend for himself most afternoons, walking the 3 blocks home alone, his brown leather backpack slung over one shoulder. Some of the other kids saw him that day, lingering by the school's chain-link fence, kicking at a pile of leaves. Tommy Reed, a freckled 6th grader, later told the police he'd waved at Justin, who gave a half-hearted wave back before heading down Maple Avenue. That was the last anyone saw of him. By supper time, when Evelyn got home from the store, the house was empty. No sign of Justin's backpack, no note, no nothing. She checked his room, the backyard, even the shed where he sometimes read comic books. Her stomach twisted into knots as she ran to the neighbors, banging on doors, her voice high and frantic. "Have you seen Justin?" "He's not home yet." By 8 o'clock, the Millwood police were involved. Chief Howard Bennett, a heavy-set man with a smoker's rasp, took Evelyn's statement while officers fanned out across town. They searched the riverbank, its muddy edges slick with fallen leaves, and poked through vacant lots overgrown with weeds. They knocked on doors asking if anyone had seen a boy 11 years old, about 4'9", blonde hair, wearing a blue jacket, and carrying a leather backpack. Nothing turned up. Not a shoe, not a scrap of clothing, not even a whisper of where Justin might have gone. Inside the house, the air felt heavy, pressed down like a storm that refused to break. The living room lamp was still on, but its glow offered no warmth. Everything sat frozen, as if even time was too afraid to move. Evelyn collapsed onto the couch, her hands gripping each other so tightly, her knuckles turned white. The telephone sat in front of her, silent and cruel. She stared at it like it might ring at any moment with hope, or with something that would shatter her completely. Frank paced the room, his steps echoing like dead weight on the floorboards. He pulled a crumpled pack of cigarettes from his pocket, stared at it, then shoved it back. His hands ran through his damp hair, trembling. We checked every damn block. He muttered more to himself than to her. The cops went around the school, talked to all the kids. Somebody had to see something. Someone must have seen him. Evelyn looked up, her eyes raw, her voice cracking. I told him to come straight home. Every day. He always did. I don't understand. You think I do? Frank snapped louder than he meant to. Then silence. He turned away, pressed his forehead against the window pane, trying to swallow the knot rising in his throat. Evelyn cried, not with sobs, just silent tears streaming down her cheeks as she clenched her cold, shaking hands. I should have picked him up. Just today. I stayed late at the shop for a few dollars more. Frank turned back, walked slowly to her, and lowered himself onto the floor in front of her. He placed his hand on her knee, voice low and rough. It's not your fault. It's no one's fault. But if someone did something to him... He stopped mid-sentence. His breathing was shallow. Neither of them spoke again. The night dragged on, endless and cruel. Neither of them slept. Each minute stretched like a lifetime. And the phone never rang. The hope that fueled Millwood's search for Justin Hayes burned fierce in those first few days, like a fire that could light up the whole town. Volunteers trudged through the woods behind Jefferson Elementary, their breath fogging in the chilly October air, their boots sinking into mud thick with fallen leaves. The Millwood Gazette plastered Justin's face on its front page, his shy smile and birthmark staring out from every telephone pole where flyers were stapled, missing. Justin Hayes, 11 years old, blonde hair, blue jacket, leather backpack. They read pleading for anyone to call with news. Chief Bennett's men worked round the clock, knocking on doors, questioning kids who'd played kickball with Justin, even grilling old Mr. Carlson, the janitor who'd been sweeping the school's halls for decades. But every lead fizzled. A waitress at the diner thought she'd seen a boy like Justin, but her memory was fuzzy. A gas station clerk on Route 17 swore he'd spotted a kid hitchhiking, but it wasn't Justin. The riverbank, the vacant lots, the abandoned barn out by Miller's farm, nothing. It was as if the boy had melted into the autumn dusk. Evelyn Hayes was unraveling. She hadn't slept since that first night, her eyes sunken and rimmed with red, her hands trembling as she clutched Justin's sweater to her chest. She'd sit in his room, the air heavy with the scent of his pencil shavings and model airplane glue, staring at his neatly made bed like it could bring him back. At night, when the house was silent except for the creak of the floorboards, she'd sob until her voice gave out her cries, raw and jagged. He's out there, cold and scared, she'd whisper to herself, her fingers twisting the sweater's hem until it frayed. She'd stumble to the window, peering into the dark, half expecting to see Justin's silhouette on the street, his backpack slung over his shoulder. She stopped eating, her frame shrinking under her faded house dress, her face gaunt like a ghost's. Neighbors brought casseroles, but they sat untouched in the fridge, growing moldy as Evelyn's hope withered. I should have walked him home. She'd moan, her voice barely audible to no one but the empty house. I should have been there. Frank was a man possessed his grief, a wildfire that consumed him. He'd quit his job at the steel mill, trading his paycheck for endless hours scouring Millwood and beyond. He'd drive his rusted pickup down every back road, his flashlight cutting through the dark, illuminating ditches and culverts choked with weeds. His hands, calloused from years of hard labor, gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles bled. Justin, he'd shout into the night, his voice hoarse, echoing off the hills. He'd stop at gas stations, diners, even strangers' homes, shoving Justin's flyer in their faces. "You seen this boy? My boy," he'd demand, his eyes wild, his unshaven face streaked with dirt and tears. When he came home, he'd collapse on the porch, a bottle of whiskey in hand, staring at the sky as if it could tell him where his son was. "I'll find you, kid," he'd mutter, his words slurring with exhaustion and drink. "I ain't stopping till I do." But every road led nowhere. Every search ended with his heart heavier like a stone sinking deeper into a river. The town tried to keep up. Volunteers dwindled as weeks turned to months, their pity for the Hayes family tinged with discomfort. The flyers faded, curling at the edges, some torn away by wind or kids playing pranks. Chief Bennett called Evelyn and Frank into his office one gray morning in December, his desk cluttered K-system, cluttered with files and coffee mugs. "We've hit a wall," he said, his voice low, avoiding their eyes. "No evidence, no leads. Could be he wandered off, got lost, or worse." Evelyn's face crumpled, her hands clawing at Frank's arm. "He didn't wander off," she screamed, her voice cracking like glass. "Someone took him. You're not looking hard enough." Frank's jaw tightened, his fists clenched so hard his nails drew blood. "Do your damn job, Bennett," he growled, storming out, Evelyn trailing behind, sobbing. By spring, the police had all but given up. The case file grew dusty in a drawer labeled Missing Persons. Millwood moved on the way small towns do, with new worries and gossip. But for Evelyn and Frank, life was a prison of pain. They never touched Justin's room, leaving his baseball glove on the dresser, his comic books stacked neatly on the shelf as if he might walk in and pick them up. Evelyn would sit there for hours, clutching his pillow, whispering, "Come home, baby, please." She'd stopped going to church, unable to pray to a God who'd let her boy vanish. Frank's drinking got worse, the bottles piling up in the backyard. He'd sit on the porch swing, staring at the street, his mind replaying that last morning. Justin's quick hug, his "see ya, Dad," as he ran off. Frank would bury his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking, muttering, "I failed you, son." The town's whispers grew quieter, Justin's name fading into a sad legend told over diner coffee. Evelyn took to wandering the streets at night, calling for Justin in a voice so soft it barely carried. "Where are you, honey?" She'd murmur, her slippers scuffing the pavement, her eyes scanning every shadow. Frank started fights at the bar, swinging at anyone who dared suggest Justin might be gone for good. "He's alive," he'd roar, his voice breaking before stumbling home to Evelyn's silent tears. They kept the same phone number, the same house, clinging to the impossible hope that Justin would find his way back. But the months stretched into years, and the boy became a memory, a ghost haunting Millwood's quiet streets, his disappearance a wound that never healed. Life trudged on in Millwood, Ohio, the way it does in small towns, even when a wound festers beneath the surface. 50 years had slipped by since Justin Hayes vanished on that autumn day in 1966, and the world had changed in ways that felt both inevitable and cruel. The old diner on Main Street was now a gas station, its chrome stools replaced by self-service pumps. The steel mill where Frank Hayes worked had shut down its smokestacks, cold and rusted. Jefferson Elementary still stood, though its brick walls were weathered, the paint peeling like skin after a sunburn. Kids still ran through its halls, their laughter echoing, but none of them knew about the boy who'd walked out the school's gate and never came back. To them, Justin Hayes was just a name in a faded newspaper clipping if they'd heard it at all. The old folks, The ones who'd been around in '66 sometimes brought him up over coffee at the new cafe, their voices low, tinged with a mix of pity and unease. "That Hayes boy," they'd say, shaking their heads just up and disappeared. Never found a trace. The story had become a kind of local legend told to spook new teachers or to quiet rowdy kids. But for Evelyn and Frank, now in their late 80s, the pain was as fresh as the day it happened. They'd stayed in the same house on Elm Street, a sagging two-bedroom with a porch that creaked under their weight. They never held a memorial, never laid a headstone. To them, that would have meant admitting Justin was gone, and they refused to believe it. "He's out there somewhere," Evelyn would say, her voice thin but firm, as she dusted his untouched room, his baseball glove still on the dresser, his comic books yellowing on the shelf. They'd learned to live with the ache, though it never dulled. Evelyn, her hair now white and thin, moved slower, her hands gnarled from arthritis. She'd stopped wandering the streets at night years ago, her knees too weak to carry her far, but she'd sit by the window staring at the street lamp's glow, whispering prayers she wasn't sure anyone heard. Frank, his back stooped and his eyes cloudy, still kept the same phone number, the rotary phone gathering dust on the kitchen counter. He'd given up the bottle after a heart scare in the '80s, but his temper lingered flaring when anyone dared mention closing Justin's case. "He ain't dead." He'd snap, his voice a gravelly shadow of its former strength, his hands shaking as he gripped his cane. They leaned on each other, two old souls bound by a shared grief, their days a quiet ritual of waiting. They ate their meals in silence, the clink of forks against plates, the only sound each bite a reminder of the empty chair at the table. The town had moved on, but not the Hayeses. They'd sold their car, let the yard grow wild, but they kept Justin's room like a shrine, as if time could be persuaded to bring him back. Neighbors, the few who still remembered, would drop by with a pie or a kind word, but their visits grew rarer as the years piled up. Evelyn and Frank didn't blame them. Life had to go on even if theirs felt stuck in an endless loop of hope and despair. They'd sit together on the porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gray, and Evelyn would murmur, "He's out there, Frank. I feel it in my bones." Frank would nod, his eyes fixed on the horizon, too tired to argue, too stubborn to give up. In the summer of 2016, something stirred in Millwood, a ripple that broke the quiet of those long, silent years. It started at Jefferson Elementary, where the school board had finally scraped together funds to fix up the old library. The building was a relic, its wooden shelves warped, its windows drafty. The plan was to modernize it, add computers and a digital lab, make it a place for the future. But the past, it seemed, wasn't ready to stay buried. The library at Jefferson Elementary had always been a quiet place, its tall oak shelves heavy with the musty smell of old books, its wide windows letting in light that danced on the worn floorboards. In August 2016, contractors descended on the place, their hammers and drills shattering the stillness. They were tearing out the old wooden paneling, ripping up walls to make room for new wiring and tech stations. The work was messy dust, clouding the air, splinters scattering across the floor. On the third day, a worker named Pete, a burly guy with a graying beard, was prying loose a section of wall near the back corner when his crowbar hit something odd. The wood gave way, revealing a hollow space, a niche sealed up tight with bricks and plaster like someone had wanted it hidden for good. Pete called over his foreman and they chipped away at the bricks, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. Inside, half buried in dust and cobwebs, was a leather backpack. Its straps frayed, its surface cracked like old skin. Pete reached in, careful not to tear it, and pulled it out. The name stitched on the flap was faded but clear: Justin. The crew went quiet, the air thick with unease. One of the older workers, a guy who'd grown up in Millwood, whispered, "That's the Hayes boy's bag. The one who disappeared." Word spread fast like wildfire through dry grass. By noon, the school was buzzing with cops, reporters, and curious locals, all drawn to the library, where a piece of the past had just clawed its way out. The police cordoned off the area, yellow tape flapping in the breeze from the open windows. Chief Linda Torres, a no-nonsense woman who'd taken over from Bennett years ago, oversaw the scene herself. They opened the backpack with gloved hands, the leather creaking as it gave way. Inside were textbooks, their pages brittle, a rusted lunchbox with a faint smell of decay, and tucked in a side pocket, a folded piece of paper, its ink faded but legible. The handwriting was shaky, childlike. "I'm trapped, but I got away. If you find this backpack, believe I'm still alive." The words hit like a punch to the gut. The library, once a place of quiet study, now felt like a tomb, its walls holding secrets too heavy to bear. News of the find tore through Millwood, reigniting the old mystery. Reporters swarmed the school, their cameras flashing as they interviewed anyone who'd listen. The Gazette ran a headline, "Lost Boy's Backpack Found After 50 Years." Evelyn and Frank, now 90, heard the news from a neighbor who'd seen it on TV. Evelyn was in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she set down her coffee cup, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and dread. "He's alive," she whispered, her voice cracking, her fingers clutching the edge of the table. Frank hunched in his armchair, froze, his cane slipping to the floor. "My boy," he said, his voice barely audible, tears spilling down his weathered cheeks. "He got away." They sat there stunned, their hearts racing with a hope they'd thought long dead. That night, Evelyn knelt by her bed, praying for the first time in decades, her voice a shaky plea. "Lord, if he's out there, bring him home. Please." Frank sat beside her, silent, his hands clasped tight, as if he could will Justin back into existence. The police reopened the case, dusting off the old file and sending the backpack for analysis. The note was the real shock. Experts confirmed the handwriting matched Justin's from his old schoolwork. The paper dated to the 1960s. The words "I got away" sparked wild theories. Had Justin escaped his captor? Was he still out there living under a new name, or had he met some other fate? The town buzzed with speculation, old-timers swapping stories at the cafe, younger folks spinning theories online. Some said Justin might have run off, started a new life. Others whispered darker things, that whoever took him had made sure he'd never talk. The library became a focal point, its walls now suspect, as if they'd been hiding the truth all along. Chief Torres ordered a full search, her team tearing into every corner looking for more hidden spaces, more clues to what happened that autumn day 50 years ago. Evelyn and Frank clung to the note's words like a lifeline. They sat on their porch, the same one where they'd waited half a century, and talked in hushed tones about what it meant. "He's strong," Frank Evelyn said, her voice trembling but fierce. "He fought to get away. He's still out there. I know it." Frank nodded, his eyes distant, his mind replaying every moment he'd failed to find his son. "If he's alive, I'll see him again," he said, his voice rough with age and hope. "I have to." The town watched them from afar, their story a wound reopened, a reminder that some mysteries don't fade, they just wait, buried under dust and time for someone to uncover them. The discovery of Justin Hayes's backpack in the library wall sent Millwood into a frenzy, like a stone tossed into a still pond, ripples spreading far and wide. Chief Linda Torres, her hair streaked with gray and her eyes sharp from years on the job, didn't waste time. She ordered her team to dig into the old case with fresh eyes, pulling dusty files from the station's basement, their pages brittle and yellowed. The note, "I'm trapped, but I got away. If you find this backpack, believe I'm still alive," was the key, a fragile thread tying the past to the present. Torres sent the backpack's contents to a lab in Columbus, hoping for fingerprints, DNA, anything to crack the mystery that had haunted Millwood for half a century. She also had a hunch, one that gnawed at her gut. If Justin had escaped, where had he gone? Was he still out there living under a different name, or had something worse caught up with him? The breakthrough came when the lab ran Evelyn and Frank Hayes's DNA against national medical databases, a long shot that paid off. A match popped up a man named Jonathan Miller, 59 years old, living in a small town in upstate New York. His biological markers and age lined up with Justin's. Torres didn't want to get the Hayes' hopes up, not after 50 years of heartbreak, so she kept it quiet and sent 2 detectives to track him down. They found Jonathan in a modest clapboard house, a quiet man with a salt and pepper beard working as a carpenter. He lived alone, no family, no record of trouble, just a guy who kept to himself. When the detectives showed up at his door, their badges glinting in the morning sun, Jonathan's face went pale like he'd seen a ghost. They asked him to come to Millwood, said they had something to show him, something about a boy who disappeared in 1966. He agreed, his hands trembling as he packed a bag, though he couldn't say why he felt so uneasy. At the Millwood police station, Torres laid out the backpack on a table, its leather cracked and dusty, the name Justin still etched on the flap. Beside it was the note sealed in plastic to preserve its fragile words. Jonathan stared at it, his breath catching his fingers hovering over the table like he was afraid to touch it. "Where'd you find this?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. His eyes locked on the backpack. Torres watched him closely, noting the way his hands shook, the way his jaw tightened. "In a wall at Jefferson Elementary," she said. "We think it belonged to a boy named Justin Hayes. Mean anything to you?" Jonathan's face crumpled, his shoulders sagging as if a weight had settled on them. He sank into a chair, his breath ragged tears welling in his eyes. I don't know how to explain it," he stammered, his voice breaking. "But that's my backpack." The room went still, the air thick with tension. Torres leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Take your time, Mr. Miller. Tell us what you remember." Jonathan's hands gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. "I was just a kid," he said, his voice shaking raw with pain. 11 years old. I was walking home from school and this guy, he worked at the library, I think. He said he had a book I'd like, said it was in the back room. I followed him, stupid kid that I was. He paused, swallowing hard, his face twisting with the effort to pull the memories from the fog of 50 years. Next thing I know, I'm in this dark place. No windows, just walls and bookshelves. He locked me in there, said I had to stay quiet or he'd hurt me bad. I was so scared I couldn't even scream. Just sat there in the dark, day after day, hearing his footsteps outside the door. Jonathan's voice broke and he buried his face in his hands, sobbing like the boy he'd been. I don't know how long it was, months, maybe a year. No light, no one to talk to, just him bringing me scraps of food, telling me to shut up. I thought I'd die there. He looked up. his eyes red, haunted. One night he forgot to lock the door. I don't know why, maybe he was drunk, maybe he just slipped up. I pushed it open, ran like hell through the library out into the night. I didn't stop, just kept running through the woods, tripping over roots, thorns tearing at my legs. I collapsed somewhere, don't even know where. Next thing I remember, I'm in a hospital. No memory of who I was. A family took me in, gave me a new name, Jonathan. I didn't know I was Justin Hayes. Not until now. The detectives exchanged glances, their notepads forgotten. Torres asked about the man, and Jonathan's face darkened, his voice dropping to a whisper. He was off, you know, always muttering to himself, eyes wild like he wasn't all there. I heard someone call him Mr. Wilton once, but I was too scared to ask questions. The police dug into the archives, pulling records from Jefferson Elementary. They found a match: Harold Wilton, a part-time library assistant in 1966, known for erratic behavior and a history of mental health issues. He'd quit suddenly that year, moved away, and died in a psychiatric hospital in the early 70s. No direct evidence tied him to Justin's disappearance, no fingerprints, no witnesses, but the signs were there: his access to the library, his sudden departure, the rumors of his instability. Wilton was long gone beyond justice, leaving only a shadow of guilt that hung over the case. Jonathan's story shook the station. His memories, buried for decades, had come rushing back, each one a knife to the heart. He described the terror of those days, the suffocating darkness of the hidden room, the way Wilton's voice would hiss through the door, threatening worse if he made a sound. I wrote that note, Jonathan said, pointing to the paper, his voice trembling with the weight of it. I hid it in my backpack, hoping someone would find it. I didn't think I'd make it out. The pain in his eyes was raw, the fear of that 11-year-old boy still alive in the man he'd become. Torres listened, her heart heavy, knowing the truth was both a gift and a curse. Justin Hayes had survived, but at what cost? The Millwood police station was a hive of activity phones ringing, officers scrambling to piece together 50 years of mystery. The DNA results came back, confirming what Jonathan's story suggested: he was Justin Hayes, the boy who'd vanished in 1966. Chief Torres drove to the Hayes' house on Elm Street herself, her hands tight on the wheel, knowing this moment would change everything. Evelyn and Frank were in their living room, surrounded by faded photos of Justin, their faces lined with age and grief. When Torres broke the news, Evelyn's hands flew to her mouth, her frail body shaking. "My boy's alive," she whispered, her voice barely audible, tears streaming down her cheeks. Frank sat frozen, his cane slipping from his grip, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice rough, cracking with hope he hadn't dared feel in decades. Torres nodded, showing them a photo of Jonathan, his face older but unmistakably their son's, the birthmark still faint on his cheek. They didn't wait. Torres arranged for Jonathan to come to Millwood the next day, a flight paid for by the town's community fund, raised in a flurry of donations once the news broke. The reunion happened in the Hayes' living room, the same room where Evelyn had sat night after night clutching Justin's sweater. When Jonathan walked in, his carpenter's hands calloused his eyes, nervous but warm. Evelyn let out a sob that seemed to come from her soul. She staggered forward, her arms wrapping around him, her frail body trembling against his. "Justin, my baby," she cried, her voice muffled against his shoulder, her tears soaking his shirt. Frank, slower to move his legs, unsteady, reached out his hand, gripping Jonathan's arm like he needed to feel he was real. "Son," he said, his voice breaking, tears spilling down his weathered face. "We never stopped looking. Jonathan, Justin held them both, his own eyes wet, his breath hitching as he tried to speak. "I'm sorry I didn't come back sooner," he said, his voice thick with guilt. "I didn't know who I was." They sat together for hours, the three of them on the old couch, talking through tears and laughter, piecing together a life stolen by time. Justin told them about his years as Jonathan, the family who'd taken him in the quiet life he'd built, always haunted by a sense of something missing. Evelyn and Frank hung on every word, their hands never leaving his, as if letting go would make him disappear again. The news spread like wildfire, hitting national headlines. Missing boy found alive after 50 years. Reporters descended on Millwood, their vans clogging Main Street, but the Hayeses kept to themselves, savoring their miracle. Jefferson Elementary held a ceremony in the library, not for a tragedy, but for a triumph. The backpack and note were placed in a glass case alongside a photo of Justin as a boy, and a new one of him with Evelyn and Frank, their smiles fragile but real. The principal, a young woman who'd grown up hearing the Hayes boys' story, spoke to the crowd, her voice steady. "This is a reminder that hope doesn't die," she said, "and neither does love." The town applauded, some wiping tears, others whispering about the library's dark past, now redeemed by a story of survival. The case was closed, though not without loose ends. Harold Wilton, the likely culprit, was beyond justice, his death in the 70s leaving no chance for answers. The police report noted his mental health history, his access to the library's hidden room, and his abrupt exit from Millwood, but without hard evidence, it was as close to truth as they'd get. For Justin, the memories were a wound reopened, but he found peace in his parents' embrace and knowing they'd never given up. The backpack, once a symbol of loss, now stood as a testament to resilience, a reminder that even the darkest secrets could be uncovered, and a family torn apart for half a century could find its way back together. And that was the story of Justin Hayes. If you're like me, you probably felt a knot in your chest the whole way through, and maybe even now sitting in that quiet moment after it ends. This isn't just a story about a missing boy. It's a story about memory survival and the incredible weight of hope. What hit me the hardest wasn't just Justin's terrifying ordeal, it was what his parents went through. Evelyn and Frank didn't just lose a child. They lost time. They lost peace. They lost parts of themselves waiting in silence. And yet, they never gave up. Never stopped believing. That's what got me. That kind of love, that fierce, aching refusal to let go, it's raw, it's painful, and it's so deeply human. And then there's Jonathan Justin carrying a childhood of darkness inside him without even knowing it. The trauma, the loss of identity, the buried fear. It all came rushing back with one glimpse of a dusty backpack. And in that moment, everything changed. This story reminds us to look deeper, behind silence, behind loss, behind time. It's a tribute to resilience, to those who wait and those who survive in ways no one can see. If this story moved you, please leave a comment below. What part struck you the most? Did you relate to Evelyn's quiet strength, to Frank's desperate searching, or to Justin's journey of rediscovery? Let's talk. Let's feel this together. And if you haven't already, subscribe and share this story with someone who believes that hope can outlive anything. Thanks for being here, friend. See you in the next story.